Hey everybody, it's Sean Kennedy for Open Visual Effects. Thanks for coming by to check this out. Today we're going to take a look at undistortion of your scene with using STmaps. If you've done any match moving, especially in kind of like a studio pipeline type thing, you want to be able to undistort, redistort your footage, or at the very least distort the CG that you're adding into your footage to match your camera settings, basically. Otherwise, you'll find that on edges and things, your track will look like it's floating or drifting or something. And that typically is just lens distortion. So let's go ahead and dive on in. I've got a scene. I've already got match moved here, ready to go. And here on the site, there's other tracking tutorials if you want to learn a bit more about that. Also, all over the website, a million people have already done as well some motion tracking tutorials. So I've already got a solve. It's pretty good. 0.72, really good solve. I shot this on a Canon 5D Mark III with a 50mm prime lens, which I plugged in here. And when I solved, I only solved for K1 and K2. I didn't have to worry about the focal length. And I got my polynomial lens distortion values, which if we take a look at, if you turn on the render, distort and undistort, you'll see, let me go back to frame 1. Just for the heck of it, and you'll see, right, we zoom in down here, we turn on, you can see, you know, this whole link right here is getting kind of shoved right out of the frame with the undistortion. So you can see it's subtle, but it's there, and it's necessary if you're doing you know, high-end CG work. So how do we get that into your compositing program of choice? Today we're going to look at Nuke and Natron. But you may be dealing with Fusion or After Effects, and I'm sure you've found that if you've tried to just type in Blender's polynomial K1 and K2 values into a lens distortion tool in one of your compositing programs, you'll find it usually doesn't work. I have yet to see any instance where it matches the undistort between what Blender's doing and what the compositing program will show you. They're usually really different. So something's broken there, and there may be a fix in the works. When that happens, I'll certainly get a tutorial up ASAP. I'm kind of helping test it out right now. But for now, what we can do is use an STmap to get that same information, these values, across in a more visual way, where we use an image to distort your footage or your CG footage or whatever you're doing. Let me go ahead over here into Natron. This is what a STmap base image looks like. It's basically just a red gradient going from 0 to full red, a value of 1 in the red channel, 0 to 1 horizontally, and 0 to 1 in the green channel vertically. And then you add them together, and you get these shades of yellow as well. And basically what it is it gives you an image that matches the size of your footage, which for this tutorial, everything's going to be 1920 by 1080 standard HD. It gives you an image that size where every single pixel has a different value. And thus you can trace those pixels, you know, track them wherever they go through the image. So if as you warp them, right? So if a pixel from right here ends up, you know, another 30 pixels kind of further up and to the right, you'll be able to warp your image to match that. But we have to make one of these base images first that we then apply our undistortion to be able to use it in the compositing programs. So we're going to look at 3 ways to make that. The first we're going to look at is in Blender, actually. I started in Nuke. Yeah, we can dive in with Nuke. But now I'll show you the problem, actually, with Nuke. I found it a great, when I was looking around, because you can Google and find one of these STmap images very easily, which is probably the easiest thing to do. Just do Google and download one. But if you do want to make one, in Nuke I found a quick expression where you just plug in an expression into the red channel, into the green channel. I threw 1 into the alpha channel just to be safe. And it gives you this. And there's the expression, and this will, of course, be on my website and all that. And it does exactly that, right? It's like the height, the width, and all that. I found, though, saving this and then bringing it into Blender, it was coming in all black, and it was giving me problems. I couldn't get it to show up. And through another friend on Twitter, I found a bug in Blender. He found the bug report for it where it wasn't working. But if you slug information into the Z depth channel, for some reason it works. So I was just taking a constant solid color, making it a Z depth pass, and then putting that in the mix, and saving it out as an EXR. EXR, I turned on raw data so you didn't have to worry about color space. 32-bit float, zip compression's fine, it's default, and just save out one frame of it. If you put that Z depth information in here in Nuke, it will work in Blender, but it shouldn't be necessary elsewhere. So on Blender, if you want to do the same exact thing, this is pretty crazy. On Twitter, a friend named Irfan Silak, I'm not sure if I'm saying that exactly right, Kalik, Silak, Irfan, something like that. He's got a great technique for making an STmap in Blender so easily. Basically, all I did is open a new file, or all he did, and showed me. Make a new file, delete the cube and the light, so you've only got a camera. Doesn't even matter where the camera's positioned or what it's looking at. In your world nodes, bring in a texture coordinate and plug the window output into your background color, turn on render, and there you go. There's your image. Super easy, insanely easy. I turn up the renders. I'm using cycles. He said it also works fine in Eevee. I just turn up my samples a little bit. I make sure my out settings are 1920 by 1080 and hit render, right? F12 renders the image out. I didn't even bother to set up the output because you only want one frame. You can go under image, save as, and do exactly what you would have done out of Nuke if you were using that. Is you want to go to OpenEXR, RGBA with the alpha, full float, zip, lossless, and then save that as I called it OpenVisualEffects STmap demo, the base, right? Base, like base image. So that's what we're saving that as. In Natron, same exact thing. You grab an expression node, and I tried plugging in the exact same expression I used in Nuke right here, and the width and height variables for some reason didn't work, so I just typed in the frame size, 1920, 1080, 1 in the alpha, and it worked great. Save that out, same exact thing, EXR, raw color space, 32-bit float, zip compression, save it, works great. So let's go ahead back and see how we're going to apply, once you've got your STmap base image and you've got your track and your solve, how do we apply that? So the trick is that Blender has some issues with overscan in the compositor. And overscan is important because, as I was saying, when you apply the undistort, it bumps that image out, right? It's as we look at this, right, and we turn this off and on, it's moving pixels outside of the frame edges. So we want to be able to see that, but we don't want to change the size of anything, right? But we're going to have to change the size by putting a little pixel buffer around the frame. So the frame is going to get bigger, but nothing's really going to, the frame is just going to stay as it is. And the way to do that is with this percentage. However, if you just turn this up to, say, 110% and hit render, it's going to be bigger than 1920 by 1080, but it's still going to be, it's going to scale everything up proportionally to fit that new 110% thing. We don't want that. So the way to do that, also another Irfan showed me this one on Twitter, is to throw in a distort scale, set it to absolute, which basically lets you define the pixels. So 1 means somewhere in here. There it is. There's 1 pixel a frame. But what we want is 1920 by 1080, or whatever your footage is that you're working with. And now that's locked it to that. You don't see any difference yet because the compositor doesn't show you the overscan. We can force it, however, to show us the overscan. If you duplicate this scale and you set it to render size and just leave it on stretch and you plug that in, now what it's going to do is it's going to make it bigger. So if you put this one here where we've locked the scale and then we're undistorting it. If you slap it over top of this one, you should be able to see it entirely, in its entirety. Mix, right, throw that there, plug this into the bottom, and there we go. There you can see the borders of it, right? So I move that down here. That's exactly what we want to see. So now if I turn off and on this undistort, you can see what's happening, right? Nothing is really changing size. It's just applying the undistort, and we have a buffer of pixels around the edge to catch that so we can see it, which is exactly what we want. And it looks like 110 is a bit too much. So I'm going to go down to 105, and if you just change frames and come back, you can see that's a little bit better. We don't want to go too big. You don't want to have too much empty space in there just for file sizes and stuff. So that looks great. If for some reason you're seeing the image through it and you don't want to see that, you shouldn't, basically. But if you do, for any reason, you can also actually just duplicate this mix right here and make this black. And what that's going to do is now it won't matter what the alpha channel coming in looks like, because this image is always going to be black. So there you go. That's how we capture that undistortion with an overscan of 5% or whatever your footage. If you use something like a GoPro, it's going to be crazy, like 130, 140, something like that. It's going to be nuts. And it'll be different for every camera and every lens, all that kind of stuff. So, and even your focus, of course, will change all that stuff. So there you go. You can take a look at that, dial it in. Once you've decided what it is, you want to leave it there, right? So now let's go ahead and do this. So we only have one input, so we can change this if we want. And we want to bring in our base STmap image that we created, right? This thing. Plug that into there. If we take a look at that end, you can see it's undistorting it, right? It's got that bow in it now from the undistortion, which is exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and save that. Now, again, you can set up your output and hit render if you want, but there's no real need to, because you're just looking at it right here in the viewer. And again, all you need is one frame. So just go image, save as, same thing, OpenEXR, RGBA, float, full, zip. Save this one as, I called it Open Visual Effects STmap demo undistorted EXR. So this is the STmap that undistorts the footage. So go ahead and save that. And then in your compositing program of choice, which we'll be using Natron, bring in that image, right? So here's that image that we've got. And in Natron, what you can see now is that new size, right? So here's our footage, which is just standard HD. But if we look at our undistorted, overscanned STmap, we've got a new size here, 2016 by 1134. That's going to be important. If you plug your STmap in, just a standard STmap node, and plug in that image into it, and if you take a look at it, you can see what it's done is it now has undistorted the footage and made the image bigger, basically. There's a little bit of funkiness on the edges, and I believe that is from anti-aliasing here, right? Because anti-aliasing gives you a different value, for these pixels, right? So basically this pixel is reading way darker than this one, so it's a different value. But somewhere in this image is another pixel and it's slapping that pixel from here up to there. So that's why we're getting this little fringe, right? So I need to figure out a way to kind of unmultiply, like bring in, like basically make an alpha, unpremultiply it, and then it should work fine. I'm still working on that exactly, but it shouldn't be too big of an issue, I don't think, anyway. But that's what's giving you some of these weird pixels on the edge. But yeah, that's basically the undistort, right? And we can see also now running it through this STmap, we've got that new size, 2016 by 1134. So in Blender, because now we need to create our distortion map to get it back to the original footage. And the trick is to use that new overscan size to create the STmap distorted version. You don't want to do it from this original size, because let me show you what it does, right? If we duplicate this and switch it to distort and plug in our STmap and take a look at that, what it does is it bows it the opposite direction, right? One of these is called pincushion distortion, and this is called barrel distortion. And this, if we render this out like this and use it at this size, it's not going to work. It needs to be that overscan size. However, we can't, for some reason, if you take this and plug it into here, this is not what we want for some reason. This is what I thought would work, because if you're scaling it to the render size, and the render size includes a 105% overscan, a 5% overscan on the 100%, that image size is not that, it's this, right? It's the 2016 by 1134. So you would think that the image coming out of this is 2016 by 1134. So then the distortion on that, but basically we need to lock the size again, but we need to lock it to that newer size. Let me show you. It's easier to show you. I did a whole bunch of tests like this, and it was never lining up right until I figured this part out. So if we plug this in here and say I just duplicated this absolute, because what we want to do is now make this that new size, 2016 1134. We know that's the overscan size, right? 1134. There we go. And then let's also put this over the black again. Same type of thing here. So there we go. Now you can see you've got we've got our overscan, and it's running to the edge, right? There's still some black there, right? If I switch this, you would think that this is the same, right? You would think the size coming out of this one and the size coming out of this one are the same. However, if we plug this into here, there's a slight jump, and it's real subtle, but watch this corner as I switch this back. Ready? Boom. Did you see it pop in? So that was throwing me off for at least a couple days. I couldn't figure out what was going on there. And then I realized, what if I just lock it to that size? Would that work? And it did. So now we've got this, we have an undistortion and we have a distortion. So go ahead again and save as, and do same thing, EXR, RGBA, float, zip, and call this one distorted, which is, obviously the opposite of your undistort. So that's it. We're done here. And now you can bring those images into your program of choice. Ignore this merge temporarily. Right here we're undistorting, and then with this other one, this is the distorted one, we are redistorting. We're still at that overscan size. So if I throw a reformat on that reformats it to 1920 by 1080 and doesn't resize anything, just crops it down basically like that, and we compare that to the original footage, right? So here I'm looking at both of them, right? In my viewer. If I flicker between them, you can see everything kind of jumping. You can see what we're looking at. There's no change in the image, and that's exactly what you want. You want to be able to undistort and distort, and it matches perfectly. Because of that anti-aliasing I was showing you on here, there is a small, see that small little bit there? But as soon as we figure out how to unpre-multiply it, that should go away, or extend out those edges a little bit. You don't want to do a scale. A scale will throw the whole thing off. But I'm working on that. But that's a minor thing. I think this workflow is totally usable as is. You could, if you really wanted to, throw a scale at the end of your compositing and scale it up like whatever, a sub-pixel, or at least 1 pixel, and that's it, and you should be all right. But yeah, there you go. That's how to use it. And these things work exactly the same in Nuke as well. Same exact deal. You can see there it's undistorting. There you can see those stray pixels, and yeah, down here we've got the redistort. You can see what it's doing with all those pixels, all those goofy alias pixels, and then the reformat, which of course crops it back to normal, which does exactly match the original. You do have some of that overscan left, but of course you can always crop that off with a crop, and there you go. And I set this up too. If you, I rendered out right out of Blender just to make sure everything was working. Just this and the undistort, right? If I throw this over here, boom, right? Just my footage being undistorted. I rendered out the first frame and brought it into Nuke, Natron, whatever. And if you do the same thing, right here we've got that. Here we've got that. What's this one? And then this one should be 1. There we go. Right, so there's our undistort. The undistort's coming from Blender this time, and the footage is just in here. If I compare them, if you run it through the STmap and then crop off those edges and compare them, they work. It works perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So here you can see I'm flickering between them. If I zoom way in, flicker between them, there's no change, which is exactly what you want. You can even look at a difference mat of it and see, if I turn off the STmap, you can see exactly what areas are being affected by the lens distortion. So yeah, it's totally working. This is a great setup, and hopefully we can figure out that anti-aliasing edge problem. And yeah, I've got screenshots of the node setup. I've walked you through how to do it. So that's it. That's the whole pipeline. And I hope this helps people who are trying to move their lens distortion out of Blender into your compositing program. Question and comments below. Don't forget, I do have a donation button on the website if you're feeling generous. And yeah, find me on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, and see you out there. Bye.